This story takes place in a very small town in the northeast region of the United States, in the summer, before I went off to college in 2015. After I graduated high school, my parents decided to move to a smaller, more affordable house, about 45 minutes north into the mountains. We stayed in my childhood home because the public schools in my area were the best in the state, and my parents really valued my education. I ended up going off to an amazing university, and now I have an incredible career because of my excellent education. As most people in the US know, amazing public education usually means higher property taxes. My parents got to the point where they could not afford the taxes on their 4,000 square foot home anymore and decided to sell it just after I graduated from high school. Their home is humble, and it sits on a beautiful piece of land on the side of a beautiful mountain. The trees are always so green, and there's a lot of wildlife around. They don't have many neighbors either, as their driveway is about 1.5 miles long, but this is what they chose to live in after I went off to college. In August of 2015, we moved into this new house. I wasn't planning on staying long as I was getting ready to head off to college as a freshman for the first time. We decided to have a little housewarming party with a bunch of family friends, and my best friend at the time as well. My dad was manning the barbecue. My mom was making drinks. We were playing with our dogs. It was a grand time, and everyone had so much fun. My dad had built a brick fire pit in our backyard. Just to set the scene for you here, the fire pit was about 30 feet from our back patio door, and we had a picnic table and other seats all around. Behind the seating was the tree line. It was so dark sometimes at night, you needed a flashlight to see 10 feet in front of you. With the fire pit lit, you couldn't see someone unless they were either sitting next to you or across from you in front of the pit. My best friend decided to stay the night, and we asked my dad if we could make s'mores. As it was getting a little chilly as it does in the late summer in the Northeast at night, my parents left us outside with my dog, Nino. Nino was a huge 100-pound black lab pit bull mix. He was such a loyal and incredible dog that my dad trained as his right hand. He was our protector, as he could run extremely fast, was very strong, and alerted us when something went bump in the night. Side note, he passed away a week before I got married in 2022. He was 17 years old and lived an adventurous life with my parents, hunting squirrels, laying out in the sun, and running amok. Nino laid in between us, facing the tree line, and my best friend was to my right. Our backs were to the dark, dense tree line. Our first mistake. We were laughing, joking, and eating s'mores together, planning for the future, and generally excited about going off to college together. She decided to play some music, and we just relaxed, feeling content and at ease. It was the perfect summer night, until Nino started growling. I saw his ears perk up and his head cocked to the side. He then sat up and continued to growl. My best friend and I both looked at each other, thinking Nino just saw a stray animal or something non-threatening. This area was known for lots of deer and rarely a coyote or wolf. As he was trained to help my dad hunt deer, we assumed it was a buck or fawn in the distance behind us. We went back to singing along to the music playing and talking about our fall 2015 class schedule. Again, Nino started growling. Our second mistake. We did not call out for my dad. We didn't even think there was a problem until Nino started barking repeatedly, this time louder and more vicious. He stood up and started barking as if alerting us to activity beyond the tree line that we could not see. We stood up as well, the fire obscuring our view. My best friend took her phone, paused the music, and turned on her flashlight. She started to walk towards the edge of the tree line with Nino by her side, still growling and barking, alerting us to not go any further and to call for help. We stood still in silence, listening. I was too afraid to even breathe at this point. She started walking into the woods, and when she shined her flashlight, she saw a figure, someone peering behind a tree. A man with a green shirt and green pants on, about 5'11" with glasses too. We screamed and ran as fast as we could inside, leaving the fire unattended and this creepy man behind the tree. What we did not know at the time is where this man came from. We crashed through our front door, breathless with Nino tailing behind us, and startled my mother who was washing dishes and cleaning up from the party. She was talking to my dad about something they saw on the news, and I think we cut him off mid-sentence to explain that there was a man dressed in all green lurking behind a tree in the woods. We didn't know how long he was there or if he was still there, but we were both crying. I remember feeling extremely sick, like I was going to throw up. My dad jumped up, grabbed his shotgun and headlamp, and ran outside with Nino. My mom gathered us into the living room, shut all of the lights in the house off, and locked the doors. She told us to be quiet and that she was going to call 911. As she did that, my best friend and I shook in fear. We were anticipating gunshots and screaming, but never heard any. My mom, now on the phone with 911, described what we saw to the operator. I heard my mom say, "Oh," in an alarming way. At this point, my dad came back inside, and my mom let him know that the police were on their way to us. Being in a small town on the mountain with less than 10,000 people means that we don't get our own police force. We get the state police every time there is a call made to emergency responders. My dad put his gun away and waited outside for the police to show up. To our bewilderment, they didn't just send one police officer, but 10 and an entire SWAT team and helicopter to circle the area. We were, rightfully, terrified. I was practically having a panic attack at this point. The police officers came inside our home and asked my best friend and me what the man was wearing, what he looked like, if we were able to discern any scars or tattoos. We explained the weird matching green outfit and the glasses. The officer excused himself and alerted the police and SWAT members outside of our description. They started to search the woods behind our home with guns drawn, flashlights, and the helicopter circling above. They advised us to stay inside, and that they would let us know if they found something. After about 25 minutes, we got another knock on our door. It was not one but two officers this time. My dad let them in, and they began to explain the situation. One officer explained that we must have seen on the news that a convicted felon from the prison about 20 miles away escaped into the mountains. The police set up a perimeter 10 miles around the prison, but the convict escaped them yet again. The outfit the man was wearing, as well as our description, signaled to them that the escaped convict was 100% lurking through our remote, densely wooded backyard that night. The all-green outfit was a standard issue for prisoners in my state then. They did not, however, find the man near us after 25 minutes of searching. He was still out there. The officers let us know that they were going to have a squad car stay and watch our house for a few days, as they were unable to locate the fugitive and believe he is still an active threat to our safety. That night, and for 3 nights after that, we all slept in the living room together. My dad's shotgun was within arm's reach of him at all times. Later that week, we got another knock on our door from the officers stationed outside of our home. They let us know that the man was back in police custody and that we were safe. They advised us to get security cameras and how sorry they were that this happened to us. After that, my parents spent about $10,000 on security cameras and fencing for our backyard. It is now all fenced in, and we have about 4 cameras to watch the tree line at all times. I guess you never know what will happen or what goes bump in the night. To the escaped convict and perhaps murderer who watched my best friend and I sing along to 2015 pop hits from your hidey hole behind my parents' isolated home, let's never meet again. I met Tom 5 years ago. We were both 17 and didn't really know better. I know it sounds like I'm undermining everything we've gone through together, from me losing my job and the issues he had with his mental health last year, but it's the truth. He was my first boyfriend, and the only boyfriend I've had to date. I was honestly amazed that a man wanted me at all. And a man like Tom, too. Even though he's put on weight and a considerable amount of stress, I still get nervous around him. It's embarrassing, really. He was handsome and experienced, a long line of girlfriends before me and expecting to do the same after me. But I caught him, hook, line, and sinker. It's an incredibly cheesy story, and I don't really want to go into it right now, especially after what's just transpired. I don't really know what to feel anymore. I've only just met his parents. All I have is my mom, and every interaction with her feels like drawn-out torture since I grew up past 11. She's possibly the most obsessive-compulsive person I've met, cloying and overwhelming. So I virtually nixed the idea of Tom ever meeting her. I was embarrassed, plain and simple. Instead, Tom asked if I wanted to meet his parents and spend the weekend at his beautiful manor in the countryside. I couldn't turn him down, 5 years together, and I hadn't even met them in person. It was starting to get annoying. Tom would always talk to them on the phone and would let me have all but 30 seconds on the line, and you could forget about FaceTime. This meant that I had no idea what my potential in-laws even looked like, apart from a grainy Polaroid in his wallet. It's clear enough to make out brown hair and the color of their sweaters. Probably some imported material. But that's about it. I jumped at the opportunity when he asked. The day we left, I called my mom to let her know. I left it that late because I knew it would undermine her plans to baby me. Questions probably ranging from, "What are you going to wear?" to, "Are you going to bring a gift? And God forbid, do you want me to come too? I can give you some support." She picked up on the third ring. "Hi, sweetheart." I smiled despite myself. She could be so much more tolerable from a distance. "Hi, Mom. Just calling to let you know that I'm going to Tom's house for the weekend, and the reception there won't be great. He grew up in the country." I could practically hear her frown. "Oh, that's quite short notice, dear. Are you going to be all right? This is the first time you're meeting them, right? First impressions count." At this point, we were loading the luggage into the car and locking up the apartment, and I really wasn't in the mood for a lecture at the big age of 22. "Yes, Mom. Don't worry about me. I need to go now. We're trying to beat the rush hour traffic. Bye now." And with that, I cut her off. How I wish she was here with me now. Tom drove the way there, the full 3 hours, and I was dead asleep. I woke up to the sound of tire on gravel as we pulled into his beautiful driveway, which was framed with flowers. His parents were stood on the doorstep waiting for us. I remember that my first impression was that they looked like the twins from The Shining, due to their identical stance and similarities in sweaters. I brushed this off as a sweet old person thing as we got out of the car, trying not to show my nerves too much. To my immense relief, they smiled at me warmly. "You must be Emma. It's so nice to finally meet you, darling." Tom's mother, Beryl, enveloped me in a hug whilst his father looked on. "Come inside. You must be freezing." She ushered me into a majestic front room, already laid with tea and other refreshments. Tom's father, George, whilst not having spoken to me yet, kept his relaxed smile on his face as he sat down next to his wife, across from Tom and me. I took in this opportunity to really look at them for the first time. It was clear that Tom had Beryl's nose, and George's eyes, a piercing green. Both had graying hair with tinges of brown still clinging on, and minimal wrinkles. They had aged fantastically, in the way I had always thought Tom would. I sipped my tea, and we got on with the pleasantries, and I got to know them for the first time. Both were wealthy retirees, and this manor and the acres of woodland around them set the scenes for Tom's idyllic childhood, despite being the only child he amused himself by exploring, whether indoors or outdoors. "I still haven't been everywhere in this house, I think." Tom laughed, and I did too, but more in disbelief at how different we were in terms of being brought up. After around 20 minutes, Beryl got to her feet suddenly. "Tom, why don't you show Emma around and unpack in your room? Your father and I need to make some finishing touches to dinner." Tom nodded, taking my hand and leading me up a spiral staircase, ignoring my silent protest that I was very content just sat there. He smiled, looking at my expression. "Come on. This'll be much more fun than lying around downstairs. I'll show you where I grew up." I couldn't resist. Really, I need to be stronger sometimes. He led me to what looked like his childhood bedroom, a blue door with his name etched with what looked like pencil in the corner. I wanted to do it with a knife, but was too scared. I snickered, pushing the door open to a normal queen-size bed and nondescript furniture. I would never say this out loud, of course, but it was extremely basic. The furniture was all that made up the room, and there was nothing hanging on the walls. Minimal color and no decoration. The only thing worth mentioning was a beautifully ornate writing desk in the corner. He saw me looking and cleared his throat. "Family heirloom. Barely used it. I preferred studying downstairs because it got so lonely up here sometimes." I noticed a lock on it that prevented anyone from just opening it up and seeing what was inside. "Why are you looking at it so much?" I turned and faced him. His face was uncomfortable, but he hid it well. I only knew this because I know him. "No reason. Just has a lot of character." I changed the subject, feeling like we were in sensitive waters. "Where next?" Half an hour later, after seeing the extensive first floor, Tom promising me to show me the next two, and extensive grounds over the course of the weekend, we settled down for dinner. It was a normal roast, but I could tell effort was put into it, and made sure to finish, complimenting both George and Beryl. George was quick to brush me off, laughing slightly. "It was no matter. You're the first girl he's ever brought here, do you know that?" I looked at Tom, who had gone red, and giggled. I didn't know that. For a second, and I don't really know why, George and Beryl made fleeting eye contact after I said that. I blinked, and it was gone. Beryl's back straightened. I'm so glad he's found someone like you, dear. She laughed airily, and Tom shot her a slight glare, which made her laugh harder. Don't be embarrassed, Tom. My boyfriend stood up, pushing his chair back. I don't feel that hungry anymore. He threw his napkin on his plate carelessly, and proceeded to exit the dining room in a matter of seconds, going up the spiral staircase like he was 7 again, being sent to his room. I looked back at his parents, stricken. I'm so sorry. I think it's his anxiety. we should have told you. George held up a hand, striking me dumb. For some reason, both of them looked completely unaffected, and sustained their eye contact with me to the level that made me uncomfortable. It's all right, not your fault. His tone was calm and restrained. It's good that it's just the 3 of us. We wanted to speak with you alone anyway. This gave me goosebumps. Was I about to get a talking to? What had I done wrong? Beryl noticed my expression and grabbed my hand. Darling, we are going to ask you some questions. I want you to respond as truthfully as possible. I nodded, completely bewildered. George leant forward, looking solemn. The weight of the words he was about to say seemed to rest on his shoulders. Do you feel safe when you're alone with him? I stammered. Yes, of course. We've been together for 5 years. I felt a sense of anger rise at the same time. Why ask me this now, after I've been with him for so long and will sleep in the same room with him tonight? Beryl held my hand tighter, and I fought the urge to rip mine away. Tom can get very controlling sometimes. You're the first constant girlfriend he's ever had. We just wanted to check that everything was all right first. Bile rose in my throat, but I forced it down. Yes, I'm fine. We're fine. I omitted the fact that this was our first meeting, and I had never seen their faces beforehand, or the unease I had surrounding the writing desk. I saw these as simple Tom-isms, just little things that he did that I shouldn't think too much about. Thank you for your concern, but I don't think that this is necessary. He's gone through a rough patch and is just working through it, that's all. They frowned but still nodded. Quite a considerate thing to do, I realized, as my mother would probably have just pushed further. Beryl gave a tight-lipped smile. We trust you, darling. Just please be mindful. If something is off, if it seems as though he's being very secretive, then you need to tell us. I buried my thoughts the best I could. Sure. If you'll excuse me, I'll check on how he's doing. I got up and left the dining room, trying my best to block out the hushed tones behind me. He was sat on the bed in his childhood room, facing the writing desk. I stood, my back to it, and held him, a method of slowing his breathing that we had devised together. He mumbled something into my shirt. What was that? I inquired, lowering my face slightly so I could hear him better. Tom looked up, his piercing eyes meeting my dull ones. Promise me something. I nodded. Don't do anything here when I'm not around. My parents can be weird to new people sometimes, and I want you near me anyway. I frowned. Weird how? I tactically didn't mention the conversation we just had. He sighed. They try and give disclaimers to everyone. I've only ever brought you here and a few friends. They cornered them and interrogated them about me. I tried to keep my expression neutral. He looked back down. Just stay with me. I smiled and kissed him. But when I opened my eyes, for half a second, his were open too, staring at the writing desk behind me. I needed answers. A few hours ago he went to bed, and Beryl and George wished us good night. But I couldn't stop thinking about that fucking desk and its lock. Why was it bothering me so much? Was it because of the effect it had on Tom? Or the separate conversations I had? My parents can be weird to new people sometimes. Please be mindful. Tom's words and those of his parents played an imaginary game of tennis in my head. But I had been laid flat on this mattress for hours now with no sleep coming, with just Tom's snores to listen to and that stupid desk looming across from me, taunting me to open it up. I got up and softly padded across the room, knowing that Tom was fast asleep, but susceptible to especially loud sounds, and lifted the lid of the desk. It didn't budge. Damn. I squinted in the dark, thinking about the next steps I could take, and remembered the hairpins I discarded on the bedside table. Thanking my own brilliance, I inserted them into the lock and proceeded to twist. It gave way, and I eagerly lifted the lid. My stomach dropped. Inside was a photo of me, aged 5. My hair was curled, my smile wide. Next to it was a pink bow and small blue dungarees. That was the only thing in the desk lid. I'm sat in the bathtub. That was half an hour ago. I'm trying to conceptualize this and need some help in doing so. How could he have got these things? He's never met my mother, and I never told him much about my childhood. I don't even remember those things going missing, and I can't even begin to think about how they ended up in my boyfriend's childhood home, locked and stored for God knows what. I'm trying not to freak out. This is Tom. I know him, I love him, but how much does he know about me? A lot of things have happened in the past year. My job cut down on my hours, causing me to suddenly have spare time. Since I was hired into a full-time position right out of high school, I assumed I needed to walk into places to hand out resumes. I quickly found out that nearly all of the applications were online only. I must have filled out at least 100 applications in the time it would have taken me to drive to 3 different workplaces I'd been interested in. It became a waiting game. I started to grow restless. I'd worked a full-time job for 10 years. I needed a hobby until I got a second job. Around that time, I accidentally got into hiking. I knew of some local trails but never had the time to explore them. Some friends of mine invited me on one of their outings, and I agreed. We had such a fun trip I found myself wanting to go out more often. Even after I picked up a part-time job, I started walking the trails whenever I could. I loved just hiking and seeing the new sights of the national park I'd neglected to visit. I often put my earbuds in just to get into a good audiobook for hours on my days off. In the middle of summer, my set of friends planned a small weekend getaway. I couldn't afford to go with them. They suggested we do a hike the day before they left, and for us to meet at the start of a trail none of us had taken yet. According to them, there were some nice caves hidden away along the path. I felt excited seeing something new. I packed my bag and set off on my way to the meeting spot. I worried about the weather on that day. It rained hard the night before. The summer weather brought some nasty storms on and off for most of the season. The sky was bright, so I carried on. I got a bit turned around on the trails trying to find the right one. I also needed to rest a few times more than I normally do, due to the elevation of the trails. I've kept to the easier trails, so I hadn't been fully ready for this hike. With the sun cooking my skin, I carried on hoping all of this was worth it. I made a few mistakes on that trip. Mistakes that nearly cost me my life. First, I got lost. I hiked up a high trail that ended in a cliff. I stopped to wonder where I got turned around. I slipped my bag off my back to drink some water and get out my phone. The signal wasn't great, but I took a photo to send to my friends asking if they knew where I ended up. I assumed I would be getting a message back shortly mocking how lost I'd gotten. I expected them to have sent me some texts by now saying how late I was. My second mistake was that I got very close to the edge of the cliff to take that photo. I wasn't afraid of heights, and I should have been. My third mistake was I didn't put my phone away or put my bag back on right away. When the dirt and rocks crumbled under my feet, I dropped my phone trying to grab a hold of anything that might keep me from falling. My fingers caught the dusty, rough cliffside as I fell, causing some of my nails to break or get outright torn off. Within half a second, I found myself rolling down the cliff, my body getting beaten from the fall. My bag got hooked on a branch and I heard a pop from my shoulder when all my weight was supported on the strap for a few painful seconds. My arm slipped out and I started falling again. It was a miracle I didn't die from the fall. My body knocked some rocks loose. They came tumbling down after me. I sometimes wonder if it would have been better if I died on the way down. Nothing but pain and fear waited for me at the bottom of that cliff. I got knocked out for an unknown amount of time. At least I landed on my back. My entire body hurt. I couldn't sit up for a long time. I just mentally cursed myself for being so stupid. The relief of being alive faded the moment I saw how bad my situation looked. My foot and ankle hurt like crazy. I managed to sit up, and my body turned cold. The rocks that rolled after me had landed on my foot, pining it to the ground. I forced myself to lean over, trying to dig at the ground to get it free, but found it impossible. I landed on solid, rocky ground. My foot was most likely broken and pinned between literally a rock and a hard place. No matter how much I struggled, it wouldn't budge. I nearly passed out from pain the first time I moved my ankle trying to pull it free. I acted slower after the first failed attempt to try and figure out just how screwed I was. I wasn't sure if I sent that text to my friends or not. I looked around, not seeing my bag or my phone. There was a good chance my phone was in a million pieces on the side of the cliff. With some effort, I saw my bag tangled up on the cliff. It was brown, so it blended with the cliffside. I kept cursing as I thought about what to do. If my friends didn't hear from me, they would call the park rangers, right? I just needed to wait for someone to find me. But how long would that even take? Hours? Days? I started to shake at the grim outlook. I wanted to just scream until someone found me. No matter how tempting, I refused to lose my cool. If I panicked, I could hurt myself. I didn't have any food or water. Conserving my energy was ideal. I hated myself for not looking up any survival tips before I started hiking. It was only just walking around. How dangerous could it be? How could anyone be so dumb? I regretted a lot of choices that lead me to that moment. With my head swimming, I just laid back down. I used my arm to block out the sun from my eyes, silently praying someone would find me soon. I did let myself cry for a little while on the first day. I needed to get it out of my system. Hours passed without any sign of help arriving. My leg wasn't looking great. Someone needed to show up soon, or else I risked dying from an infection. I noticed some blood seep from under the rock, but I couldn't do anything about it. Unable to do much else after the sunset, I let myself fall into an uneasy sleep. My body was so exhausted I passed out despite how hard and uncomfortable the ground felt. A smell caused me to open my eyes at the crack of dawn, the light low and gray. Turning my head, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat twice. First, my water bottle had been placed right next to my head. I grabbed it, not thinking about why or how it got there. I took a few sips, forcing myself to not drink the entire thing. Then I focused on what woke me up. The sight caused my heart to nearly stop. A few steps away from me was a pile of something that took me a few seconds to clue in. A heap of small dead birds with their heads twisted off sat already starting to rot. I gagged but kept my water down. My stomach hurt from hunger, and then twisted from nausea. My head started to swim with fear. Who killed so many birds, and why did they put them next to me? How did I not wake up to the sound of someone moving around? And why didn't they help get my foot free? I had too many questions and no answers. I almost considered an animal of some sort killed the birds, but an animal would not have brought my water bottle over. My fear would not go down. Someone had been there that night. Instead of helping, they left a strange warning. Was it a warning? If so, why leave some water? Did they drug or mess with my bottle in some way? The sun came up, giving me enough light to look around for footprints or any signs of another person from the night before. My heart sank when I didn't see my bag caught on the cliffside. Someone had definitely taken it. Unable to help myself, I screamed out for help with only a slight echo answering back. I spent the second day making no progress in freeing my foot. I wasted some water trying to see if it might make the rock slippery enough to pull my ankle free. At least it was cloudy that day. By the end of the day, my exposed skin was red. If it wasn't so cloudy, I would have had some serious burns by then. My throat hurt from thirst, and my stomach twisted from the smell of the dead birds that cooked in the sun all day. I thought people could live a few days without water, but in the direct sunlight, I would sweat out what I had drank. An infection from my broken and cut-up foot might not be fast enough to kill me before dehydration did. I fell into an uneasy sleep a few hours after sunset. My entire body was in pain and my hope slowly fading. To keep sane, I kept thinking of the food I wanted to eat once I got back home. If I was rescued, I wanted to eat an entire cheesecake, maybe two. The simple goal was enough to ease my nerves to fall asleep. That night I found out who left the dead birds. A small noise woke me. I reached over in the dark to my water bottle for a small sip, and to my shock found it full. It also felt cold. I drank down the fresh water, not caring about how it got there. I needed to live first, then worry about who refilled it, and yet didn't fully rescue me. The sound that woke me came again. I'd completely forgotten about it because of the fresh water. I sat up to try and find the source of the sound. At first I thought my mind was just playing tricks on me. Then a soft voice came. "Hey." The single word faintly echoed through the rocky area. My mouth opened to respond, but I froze when my eyes landed on the source of the sound. A dark shape sat on a branch of a tree in the distance. It looked like a person wearing a furred poncho sitting like a frog. The hood of their handmade coat over their head made their face look pitch black. What nearly gave me a heart attack was a set of glowing red eyes set in that dark face. Hey... The voice came again from the person. No, it wasn't a person. After looking at them for a bit longer, I noticed the exposed dark arms looked too long and thin. The hands with extremely long fingers tipped with claws. It might be saying a single word, but that didn't make it human. The voice was almost normal and sounded lazy. I tugged at my foot trying to get it free. I could not be out here with this thing watching me. A flash of pain went right up my leg. I moved my ankle in a bad way. The pain was almost enough to make me pass out. I got dizzy and needed to go back down. My body shook from so many emotions and stress. That single word came, almost sounding concerned. Hey! I refused to respond to it. Unable to help myself, I passed out again. I prayed that what I saw watching me had only been a nightmare. I woke up again a little after sunrise, my strength fading from being outside in the elements for so long. At least the pile of dead birds was taken away, a single dead rabbit in their place. Next to my newly refilled water bottle sat something that would have been useful if it wasn't broken. My cell phone broke into a few pieces on the way down the cliff. Each piece had been neatly organized together. I no longer could pretend that creature was a nightmare. Something watched me in the night, trying to be useful in its own way. Something scratched my arm when I moved, so I turned my head to find a branch with some leaves still attached. I wondered what that was doing there. When the sun came up, I figured it out. I was able to stick the branch in a crack in the ground and hide under the small bit of shade it provided. My already sunburned arms hurt like hell. My face stung from sweat and burns. I couldn't stop myself from drinking the entire bottle of water that day. My stomach hurt like hell from only drinking the past 2 days. A fever set in from an infection on that day. I didn't have much longer. I knew that. I needed a knife or a sharp rock to free myself in the most gruesome way possible. I considered if I could even cut off my foot. I could just die from blood loss in the process. If I died, at least I wouldn't need to be stuck in this heat. Near the end of the day, thunder signaled a storm rolling in. At first I felt happy about the rain. The storm clouds blocked out the sun, and a downpour started. Soon I became soaked, the hard wind cutting down right to my bones. I shivered on the cold, hard ground, unable to do anything. I didn't even have the strength to make another attempt to free my foot. I went in and out of sleep for a few hours, my fever growing due to the rain. My eyes cracked open in the dark. My chest was so heavy I could barely breathe. The sound I didn't want to hear came, but it was far too close. Hey! I lifted my head to see the creature from the night before sitting on my chest. The glowing red eyes squinted in a smile. I saw dark teeth shining in the night. Too many teeth for that face. My mouth opened to respond, but I found my tongue too heavy. The thing reached out a long arm to take my water bottle. With some issues, it twisted off the lid. With one large hand, it lifted my head enough to let me drink. Most of the water spilled out around my mouth and I coughed hard for a few minutes. The fever tore through my body and my skin burnt to hell. Even the pain of my broken foot took the back seat to a pounding headache. I wondered why this creature was keeping me hydrated, and yet it didn't try to get my foot free. The thing got on all fours over top of my body to slowly shuffle back. Those red eyes never left my own. It stopped with its head by my thigh, the head sideways, and large smile clear in the dark. A large hand landed on my knee, causing a wave of pain to shoot through up to my brain. I knew what this thing was asking. We didn't need to speak the same language to understand each other. It still spoke one last time to confirm the request. He... The mouth hovering over my thigh, the other hand wrapping around my upper leg. My choices were to die in the next few hours from an infection and exposure, or give in to this monster's demand. I braced myself the best I could. With a trembling heartbeat, I nodded. Okay, I said in a cracked voice, giving permission. The thing let out a happy sound. The mouth opened so wide it nearly reached the monster's hidden ears. Countless needle-thin teeth quickly came down on my leg, ripping through my jeans and into the flesh underneath. I screamed, but didn't have the strength to fight it. I only stayed awake to see the second bite. The pain shut off my brain, and I thankfully fell into a dark nothingness I expected to never wake from. But I did wake up. Weak but alive, my eyes opened to a hospital room. The recovery took a very long time. I was told I had been found in a strange way. A pair of hikers had been going down a trail when they saw an oddly shaped figure drag my body into the middle of the path and then run off into the woods. They never caught up to the figure, and after seeing my condition, focused on getting me help. I was missing my entire left leg. The doctors had no idea how I survived it being removed in my condition. They said I should have died from the shock and blood loss. They all said it looked as if some sort of animal chewed it off. I told the police what happened the best I was able. Turns out when I didn't meet my friends, they just assumed I got busy and forgot to send them a message saying I wasn't going to meet them that day. They then went on the trip, so no one realized I was missing. At least my job sent the police by my place as a wellness check when I didn't show up for a shift. They were in the process of starting a missing person report when I was found. They didn't believe I saw a creature, and I admitted to them I didn't want to believe it either. The stress may have made me see things. The police assumed if I did see someone, then it would have been some person living in the mountains messing with me. But that didn't explain my leg. They shrugged that off, saying some sort of animal got to it, and the person who found me did the right thing by getting me to a place where I would be found. The police knew some unhinged people lived in the woods. They thought I got lucky to make it home alive, and they recommend I get better friends. I keep thinking back to that night. The missing leg is a constant reminder. I know it wasn't some sort of natural animal that took my leg. There is a creature humans haven't unidentified yet living in those woods. I can only hope others don't make the same mistakes I did. If you're going out in the national parks, please be careful. Make sure people are aware of where you're going and when you'll be back. Stick to trails you know well and pack an emergency kit to always keep with you. Nature is something not to be taken lightly. I was stupid and paid the price. As helpful as that creature acted, I really don't want it to get another meal from a human. Just be careful out there. Last night, my husband woke me up at around 11:50 to tell me that someone has been knocking on our door and ringing our apartment doorbell for about 10 minutes on and off. He woke me so I could possibly ID the person. Once I looked out our upstairs apartment window, I saw the man walking to his car in our apartment parking lot, across the street from our unit. He was wearing blue jeans and a gray t-shirt. He was a medium build, possibly 30-year-old blonde man. He wasn't covering his face or anything, but the thing is, he was carrying what looked like resistance bands or rope. He sat in his car for around 3 minutes while I was on the phone with dispatch. Then, he came back to our door and knocked hard for another few minutes. Dispatch advised me that the police were on their way, and they hung up. I started videoing the vehicle. I read out the tag number and make and model, and just watched as he put his car in park and reverse over and over again. Out of seemingly nowhere, he backed out of the parking lot and started rushing away, but not before the officer arrived and pulled him over. My downstairs neighbor knocked on my door and told me that he had been peering into her little children's windows and was pounding on her door as well. She said that her husband had left only 1 minute before he started knocking at her door. She said he saw her children through the window, and that's why he continued knocking. Our doors are right next to one another, so he probably didn't know what door he wanted opened. He was watching us as well through our upstairs windows, so I turned all of the lights out and shut the blinds while I called dispatch. The police never contacted us for a statement. I've reached out the dispatch about an update, and I'm waiting to see if any action was taken. We're keeping our eyes peeled to see if he's been following us. I'm replacing my porch light bulbs with motion detectors and putting bars in our window and door tracks. My neighbor and our families are panicked, to say the least. He was outside for about 25 to 30 minutes. To the knocking man with bad intentions, let's not meet. I grew up in a small rural town where nothing ever happens. The sort of place where it wasn't unusual to leave your doors unlocked and your closest neighbors are a mile or so from your house. Our family also had this giant old cat, Tag, who was a bit of a drama king, but we loved him. One summer when I was around 9 or 10 years old, the cat starts going ballistic. Tag generally slept in my room, curled up next to me until I fell asleep, and then would get up to doing whatever cat things he did at night. Occasionally, he would meow or try to wake me up on unfortunate nights when he could see the bottom of his food bowl and needed a midnight snack. Usually if I ignored him, he would give up or rarely go try to wake up my mom instead. This night, however, He bangs against my parents' bedroom door until he gets in and is meowing loud enough to wake us up. Our bedroom doors were next to each other, and I call to Tag to come to bed because it's about 2 a.m. He's having none of it and is carrying on. My mom gets up, goes down to the kitchen, and then huffs back up with Tag on her heels, still meowing insanely. She said his bowl had plenty of food and he just walked her to the door of the kitchen. Tag was an indoor-outdoor cat, but had his own cat door through the garage, so there was no need for one of us to let him out. My mom said my brother must have left the kitchen door open and just the screen door was shut, but she wasn't holding it open forever for the cat to just stand there and not go out. She shut the kitchen door and went back to sleep, firmly shutting her bedroom door this time so Tag couldn't let himself back into their room. I always kept treats for him in my room and offered him one, but he was still meowing at their door, trying to get them up. I grabbed him and bring him into my room and shut my door to try to get him to sleep. I lay in bed trying to go back to sleep and Tag meows at my door wanting back out. I finally open my door and he bolts back downstairs towards the kitchen, and that's when I heard what sounded like a door slamming. I have 3 older siblings though, and someone is always up watching TV or running to the bathroom, so I think nothing of it. The cat finally stalks back into my room, but instead of curling up in my armpit like usual, he sat at the bottom of my bed staring at my door. I fell asleep until morning when some commotion wakes me up, and I pad down to the kitchen to find my parents on the phone with the police. They got up as usual to get ready for work, and while making coffee, my mom went to grab her rings from the little jewelry dish she had by the sink because she would take them off in the evenings to rinse dishes and load the dishwasher, but discovered the dish was empty this morning. Small town, so the sheriff sends a deputy over, and when my dad walks out to meet them, sees the ATV is missing from out back. The key is off the key ring. My brothers are all up at this point too, and we are all freaked out that while we were sleeping, some robber came in and removed the ATV key and saw an opportunity to take my mom's rings. They were asking if we had any clue when it happened, and my parents say no. My mom asked my middle brother, who was a freshman in college and home for the summer, what time he ended up off the couch last night and if he heard anything. He said he went to bed at 10 or 11 and asked what she meant as his bedroom was in the basement, and he wouldn't have heard anything in the kitchen. She said, but you were in the living room off the kitchen when I went to feed the cat and shut the door you left open, and I told you not to sleep on my couch and go to your bed as I went back upstairs. He told Mom he was in the basement since dinner and never went out or came upstairs again. He watched a movie in the basement living room before going to bed in his own bedroom. She goes white and realizes that the cat must have been trying to warn us someone came into the house, and the robber dove onto the couch and covered up to hide when she came to the kitchen and exited after she went back to bed. The cops said for someone to be so brazen they probably knew our family, knew our habits, but didn't count on the cat being so overprotective, and had probably intended to steal more, but was afraid the cat may wake the whole house. It has been over 20 years since this happened, and the robber was never caught, but it is unnerving to think it was probably someone who had been to our home before as a friend. Thank God for our cat. I was a pretty and relatively smart 15-year-old girl, a good kid who did well in school despite a tough childhood. I was working at an amusement park full-time during the summer. The area I lived in could be sketchy, but having grown up with little to no adult supervision, I was used to trying to look out for myself. My father was out of town, mother was long out of the picture, and my sister, 3 years older, and myself were staying at our home alone. I finished work at 11 p.m. when the park closed and walked home by myself as I usually did. It wasn't far, perhaps 10 minutes. I arrived home, my sister was still out somewhere, and I got ready for bed, putting my pajamas on and crawled into bed. I was starting to fall asleep, but heard a small noise. I didn't know what it was, but it didn't seem like a usual house noise. My bedroom was on the second floor with stairs leading up. I didn't hear anything after that noise, didn't investigate, just chalked it up to nothing. I started to fall back asleep when I heard what sounded like hesitant footsteps on the stairs. I was instantly awake, but in my mind it was my sister coming home and climbing the stairs where her bedroom was. Still in bed, I yelled out, "Wendy, Wendy, is that you?" I heard nothing back. I yelled again, "Wendy, is that you?" Nothing. More footsteps. I was petrified, but as I tell the story to this day, I don't understand some of my reactions that night, so really can't explain them. I got out of bed, opened the ajar bedroom door fully, and went out to the stairs. Where I stood at the top, Below me, about halfway up the stairs, was a man I had never seen before. He looked to be early 20s, a little taller than my 5'7", not a big guy, but solid with blonde curly hair. I asked him what he was doing. His reply was a garbled mess. Something along the lines of, "Where's Wendy? My mother told me not to get mixed up with women. Where's Wendy?" From his manner and wild-eyed look, he seemed like he may have been doing drugs. He had followed me home from the park and was asking, "Where's Wendy?" in response to my calling out for her. For some reason, I got very angry, not just scared, and started screaming at him to get out of the house, that I was going to call my father and Wendy, and he needed to just get out. To my surprise, he did. He turned around, ran back down the stairs, and I didn't see where he went after that. But it turns out he must have left. I have no idea how he got in, but he was definitely there for me. That's why he followed me, not burglary or anything else. He was looking to rape and who knows what else. I think the only reason he left was because he had no idea where my sister Wendy was. Thought she was in the house, and it was an added complication to him getting caught. I was so shaken I stayed up the rest of the night. I didn't call the cops. Didn't call a friend. The only person I told was my sister the next day. I don't know why. I just sat in a rocking chair, clutching my cat and rocking and crying, staying awake until the next morning. My sister never did come home that night. She stayed at a friend's and came home the next day. This happened 35 years ago. I never told anyone until now.